Okay, class. I wanted to cover a few things concerning the scanner. We had looked at this earlier in class the other day and we ran into a couple of errors. And I wanted to demonstrate how you can write a text-based um, application using the scanner. So real quickly here, I'm going to create a new project and I'll choose Java. I'm not going to create from template. I'm just going to call this my scanner example, and with this we will right click on source, new Java class, and again call it scanner example. For our class, this is a very basic Java class. We're going to go ahead and create our public static void main string array of args, add our curly brackets. Then we're going to use the scanner and we'll instantiate it and provide it with system.in. Alright, now one of the problems that we ran into was the determining the delimiter. And what we want to use is a delimiter pattern for our applications. And the way we're going to do this is use the new line character as our delimiter. This is important because previously when you would call scanner.nextLine after you did something like scanner nextInt, nextInt only took the number that was available and it never read the end character. What scanner does is it automatically uses a white space delimiter, and it's not picking up the new line delimiter. So this is why we're backspacing this out and using a new line delimiter. Okay, so now let's set it up. We're going to go ahead and do some of our conditional logic, and I used this example in class the other day, but I think it's a fun example, so we'll just use it again. So we'll do system out print line, and we're going to ask the person to enter their age, and we want them to enter their age on the same line. So we're going to just use a system out print, and then we'll use scanner dot next int, and we're going to set this to a variable called age. Now again, next int only reads a character that it's expecting to be a number, and the automatic delimiter that it uses is a white space. So what we're doing is we're setting to use the use delimiter of the new line character. Alright, so now when we hit enter after entering the number, it's going to automatically use a new line space. And so the next question we're going to ask is we're going to try to determine what the age of the person is. So we're going to say if the age is less than 17, we're going to say system out print line try again next year. Else our logic. So if age is less than 17, it's going to do this first truth statement. Otherwise, it's going to go into a false statement. And so here's what we'll say at this point. We'll say system out print line, you might make a good friend. Then we're going to ask a question. System out print line, Again, we're only going to use the print here because we want the question to follow. So we're going to say, do you like chocolate ice cream? Question mark, and we're going to expect a yes or a no. That's what that tells us. All right, so now we have print. Remember, print only prints one line. It doesn't go to the next line. Print line goes to the next line. So we're going to use scanner again, and we're going to say next. Not next line, but next. Now the reason is because we're using the new line delimiter, so we don't need to use the new line. And so we're going to say string yes, no equals a question. All right. If yes, no, oops. If yes, no equals y, we're going to print out cool. Me too. And then we're going to say, come down here to else, and we're going to say system out print line that makes me sad. All right, why does it make me sad? Because they don't like ice cream. So if it doesn't equal yes, then we're going to say that makes me sad. All right, so now we're going to come down to the next question. If, let's see, we're going to say system out print line, take out the ln for print line, one more question. Do you like coffee? Again, we're going to give the hint that they need to use a yes or no. And we're going to read the scanner. We're going to say next because it reads a string. And since we've already declared yes and no appear, it's still in scope. So we can say yes, no again equals scanner. And then say if yes, no equals ignore space y equals ignore case y. Just print out system out print line. Yay! I have a new friend. Else system out print line. Shucks. I am walking away. All right, so now we have our logic, and to make this a little bit easier to see, we're going to just enter a space in a couple of places here. Okay, there we go. So again, for the class, we have our public static void main. We have scanner equals new scanner in scanner dot use delimiter, and we're specifying with the new line character, and we are using an extra backslash here because it's in quotes, so we have to specify that by escaping it. This is called an escape sequence. Okay, so we're going to save it, go ahead and run the program, and we'll validate that our logic is working correctly. Okay, so enter the age. Let's try 17 just to see what happens. You might make a good friend. There's something wrong with our logic. Well, what's wrong with our logic? If the age is less than 17, something bizarre is going on. All right, let's go ahead and keep going here and see what happens. Do you like chocolate? Yes. Cool, me too. One more question. Do you like coffee? No. Ah, shucks, I'm walking away. All right, so We talked about this before. Let's do a break line, and a breakpoint. And in IntelliJ, we'll go ahead and debug the scanner example again. And we're going to pick out what happens here and see maybe what we missed. All right, so we have the age. We'll say 17. We hit enter. And now it's trying to validate. Is the age less than 17? Well, no, it's not. Okay, so we know that's correct then. So we skip over that. It comes to the next question and so forth. All right, so what we can do, let's see here. Resume the program. And then we'll go back to our run. And I believe it exited out for us. All right, so let's run it again. And this time we run it, we'll say the age is 16, so it's less than 17, right? And try again next year. All right, so that worked correctly. Let's try it again. Let's try it with 17. Might make a good friend. Do you like ice cream? No. That makes me sad. Ends the program. And then the final logic statement was, do they like coffee? Do you like chocolate? Yes. Or question, do you like coffee? Yes. Yay, I have a new friend. And that's the end of that program. So it's very straightforward, simple way to step through the logic. Now, if we wanted to switch this up a little bit and move some of this logic out to a different method, we could do that as well. So let's do a method called public static Boolean, because we want it to return a Boolean statement. And we're going to ask the question, do you like coffee? And this is going to take no parameters because it's going to use the scanner. Actually, we can feed it the scanner, so we can just say scanner. All right, now let's take some of our logic here. Do you like coffee? All right, so let's grab this piece of logic here. We'll cut it. We'll paste it inside. And we need to initialize this variable, which is a string, if I remember correctly. And we want to say return statement true, return false. So do you like coffee? All right, so let's throw this statement in here. Do you like coffee? We're going to pass in our scanner, which, by the way, was initialized up here. Let's run it again and see what happens. So now, just to clarify again, we've created a method, a static method, because remember, the public static void main method it can only call static methods. So we've created a static method, we've put the logic inside of it, and we've told it to return true or false. Now, we could come over here and very well just initialize this and say likes coffee, right? All right. So now we have a Boolean variable likes coffee that returns the state of this. Okay. Now why is this important? Because now we can use the same method over here. Let's say in our logic statement, they don't like ice cream. You say that makes me sad. But you want to go ahead and ask the question, do you like coffee? And of course you could do that. That now gives you that freedom. So let's run the program again. We'll enter the age. We'll say they're 18. You might make a good friend. Do you like ice cream? Well, let's say no to test the coffee question. No. That makes me sad. One more question. Do you like coffee? Yes. Yay, I have a new friend. And again, we could do this as well by having them say yes to the coffee question. So, 18, do you like ice cream? Yes. Cool, me too. One more question. Do you like coffee? Yes. And there you go. Now, we have it returning this variable here. And so it's you could do something with this variable at this point. You could put in here and say if likes coffee, system out print line, I am dancing, right? And of course you could do the same thing down below. And else you could say something like system out print line, I am running. All right, so we could copy this, paste it over here as well. And we've added more nested logic based on these variables. All right, so if we run it again, you have the question 18, yes, do you like coffee? Let's say no. Makes me sad. One more question, do you like coffee? No. Ah, shucks, I'm walking away. I'm running. Right? So what we demonstrated is very easy here, how to divide your logic up into if-else statements and move it around. Okay, now I promised you that I would also spend some time today talking about your assignment that's in Moodle. I'm going to drag this screen over here so you can see it. And the assignment I'm going to do with you is a PC store called Fantasy Digital. Okay, I'm going to pull this out of the way. We're going to create a brand new class. I'm going to close this right here and bring up, create a new project. And I'm going to say next. I'm not going to use the template. And I'm going to call this, what am I supposed to call this class? We're calling this class, or this game, Fantasy Digital Selection. Okay, so creating the class, go down here, create my new Java, I'm calling it Fantasy Digital Selection. Okay, so first things first, public static void main string args, and like that. Now, according to our rule, according to the criteria for success, what I want you to code, I want you to create a private class that uses the parameters of the game. So I'm going to paste something in here just so we have it for reference. Here's one of the sample games. So I'm going to create a class, and I'm going to call it game. Let's just call it game right now, and we do that. All right, so now we have a class called game inside of our fan digital selection, and we're going to say game. Actually, let's go ahead and create some of our variables first. So we need a private string game name, and for this purpose we'll just call it name. private string, actually int months ago, and private Boolean has, let's say, license restriction. Okay, so these are some of our private member variables on this. And let's go ahead and just add one more variable here. We'll call this private int game ID. All right, so we have our variables. Let's create a class in here. Let's create a constructor. So you can do that again through generate and go to constructor and just select your IDs. Click OK. Now we have a constructor for all of this, and let's add one more method. We want to be able to print this out. By the way, this is a good idea here to control the creation of these objects, meaning that they can only be created through the constructor. So we'll make them all final. All right, that means we can't create any setters for it or mutators. They can only be created when the object is created. But what we do want to see is some type of accessor method where we could print out some information. So let's go ahead and create some getters. And we'll come up here, select getter, and we'll go ahead and do that. So we have our getters. And then let's also add a public void display. And we'll system out print line. We'll say game ID, and we'll append this dot game ID. We'll do the same thing here. I'm just going to paste this a couple of times. We're going to say the game name is this dot name. The months since purchased, and we'll say this is the months ago, and does game have license restriction? And for this one we're going to say, oops, this one we're going to say license restriction. All right, so we have a simple class called game inside of our fan digital selection. Okay, now to make this easier for us, we already have in your requirements, you already have a number of fields already set up for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste these in. Okay, and I'm going to say private game let's say private game. What am I going to call my game? Let's call the first game Red Dawn. Red Dawn 2. Red Dead 2. And this is going to equal a new game, and our variable is 1, and the name of the game, and it was purchased 1 month ago, and this one has a license restriction of true. There we go. So now I have a private game, Red Dawn, with all the information. Now, if I wanted to add additional, like maybe the license restriction was more than $2, I could do that. I could just come in here and create a new variable called private final. You know what? Why don't we do that? Make it just easier. Private final double, and we'll call this license restriction cost. You may be saying, Mr. Rogers, that's an awfully long name. Yes, it is. But it's also very good to be precise. All right. So this license restriction cost equals license restriction cost. All right. And we'll come over here. We'll use our generate getter license restriction cost and system out print line the license restriction cost is, say, plus this license restriction cost. All right, here's a good question for you. Maybe we don't want this last statement to show all the time. So what could we do? We could say if this license restriction is true, wrap it in brackets. I've already said this a couple of times why that's important. It makes it more readable. All right, so now we're saying if this license restriction is true, display that. Make sense? All right, so we have all of our variables set, so now we just need to go through here and set up the final pieces, 2.0. All right, so I'm going to do this quick here because then I'll come back and edit. All we're doing is setting up our games. Okay, so this one's going to be called Destiny 2. And I really don't care about the rest of that. Actually, let's do this. Back up here. This one's going to be called Destiny 2 equals new game. I'm going to make my life a little easier here and copy some of this. Paste, paste, paste. All right, you'll figure out what I'm doing here in a second because I'm just trying to keep things simple. Let's see, we don't need that. This is false and 0. All right, we got an error still. What is our error? Oh, game ID. All right, so we'll make this 2. There we go. All right, this is going to be 3, 4. I know you see all the errors and you're wondering what is going on. I'm just trying to add these in, and then I'll go back and fix all of the complaints that the IDE is telling me about. Okay, so we're going to say comma that. Just go through and You just do this, copy that, so I don't have to keep typing. Yeah. You may catch on what I'm doing here. I deplore having to type all the time for things that don't make sense. All right, so we know that this has a license restriction, so this is true, and the double amount is $2, and that. All right, we still got something going on. What is it complaining about? Oh yeah, that's why. So this is called Disco Elysium. Look at that. It automatically suggested a name for me. Don't you love it? All right. So this is false, 0, 0, like that. I may just be able to copy some of that. Yeah, look at that. Whoops. Copy. This one has a license restriction of $2. This one is true. This is no license restriction. This one has a license restriction of $2, so this one is true. $2 4 months ago. All right. And we're going to call this one what? What the golf. This one we'll call control. This one we'll call Total War. This one telling lies. It tried to help me too much. This one we're going to call Final Fantasy 14. We've got another one here. We'll call it Resident Evil 2. And our last game, Outer Wilds. Okay, so we've initialized a bunch of variables up here for our game. And we fulfilled the first requirement. And that is that all of the games use the game class. Okay, so we have an inner class called game, and we now have created all of these data types of game type. We've initialized them, and now we need to come over here, and we're going to set up some of the logic. All right, so our scenario is the business model is a flat rate of $10 an hour. Okay, so let's create a variable. I'll call this private double. This is actually a constant, so let's say private static final double, and we'll call this our flat rate, which equals $10. Always put your constants at the top of the class. That is the practice. All right. And then it's a base rate per hour for newer games. So if the user wants to play the latest release game, an additional fee is applied per hour based on how recent the game was purchased. Okay. So if the game's age is quantified in months, as is specified below. All right, so if the games are 1 to 3 months from the purchase date, it's additional $10. All right, so let's create some more constants. I'm going to copy this, paste, paste, paste. We know that the first flat rate is $10 per month, and this is if it's 1 to 3 months. So 1, 2, 3 months. I'm going to copy that, paste, paste. If it is 3 to 6 months, it's $5. If it's, okay, so we don't need to worry about that. So this is 3 to 6 months. Okay, so we got our flat rate. We got games that fall into this 1 to 3 month category and games that fall into 3 to 6 months category. The exception to this business model is the fantasy. To Fantasy Digital is you charge an additional $2 on the base price and the age purchase fee if there's a legal restriction. All right, so we got our license restriction in place. We got all of our constants set. Let's see. We got all of our variables. All right. So what else do we need to do here? We need to make let's just go ahead and start with our class. So come in here and we're going to, according to the rules, we're going to say enter your name. All right, so remember from what I told you earlier, scanner equals new, you guessed it, scanner system.in, and then we're going to say scanner use delimiter, and we're going to use our delimiter again. Oops. For a new line. And then we're going to ask the first question. Enter username. All right. So system out print line. Take out the print line though. And we're going to say enter your username. Colon and scanner dot next. Notice that next returns a string. So we're going to call this string username system out print line welcome username. Okay, and then we're going to ask them to select a number ID from the following collection of games. Okay, this is where it gets a little tricky. So we have all of our games set up here, and we need to somehow print out a display of the games. So how are we going to do that? Well, we could create another method down here and call it public void display games. And then we would say Red Dead 2 display, Destiny 2 display, Disco Elysium display, What the Golf display, Control display, Total War display, Telling Lies display, Final Fantasy 14 display, Resident Evil 12 display, Outer Wilds display. All right. There is a much easier way to do this, but we haven't gotten into creating collections yet, and that is coming up, I believe, next week or the week after. But for right now, we're going to just use what we have. There's also ways that we can handle this with inheritance and polymorphism by creating an interface and then passing each of these from a collection and calling the display method. But we're not going to do that either, and I don't want to confuse you yet. So we're going to stop with that part, and we know that our criteria is we have to display the collection of games. So we created a method to display. So we're going to instantiate our fan game digital selection, and we're going to say this is our game selection equals new selection, game selection, display games. And if we did this right, then we have display, which is called down here, and it will also display the license. Now, this is going to get difficult to read, so I'm going to go ahead and do something else. I'm going to do a just a double line at the bottom, just so it prints out a little prettier in between selections. And then we'll add one extra system out print line for a space, because when this prints, it's going to be a lot. Okay, so we got display collection, and we're going to tell the user to select a game. So we're going to say system out print, please select a game from above list. And what we're going to do to make it easier for us is we're going to say it by our ID. So please select a game ID from the above list. And guessed it, scanner.next int. And this will be int game ID. And now comes the fun part. All right, we have this game selection, and we need to figure out if the game we entered is one of those games. So, which one is it? Well, this could get tedious, right? Very tedious. So one of the ways we could do this is with a switch, right? So let's go ahead and program a method, public game find game by ID. Simple enough. Int game ID. All right, so now we're going to do our switch. We have our game ID, and let's think about this for a second. We want to return the game that matches the ID. So we could do this like so. We could say switch game ID, case, and if the value is 1, return, what is it? This red dead 2. Case 2, return this, what is it? It's going to get tedious. Destiny 2. Case 3, return this Disco Elysium. Case 4, return this. All right. Disco Elysium, what the golf. Case 5, return this. Is it control? I think it's control is the name of the game is next. Yep. Total War is after that. Then telling lies. All right. Case 6, return this. Total War. Case 7, return this. What is it? Telling lies, followed by Final Fantasy. Oops. Case 8, return this. See, we said Final Fantasy 14. Case 9, return this. What? After Final Fantasy, it's Resident Evil and Outer Wilds. Okay. Resident Evil. Case 10, return this Outer Wilds. All right. And then default, return this, and we're just going to give them Red Dead 2. That's our default. Okay, so we have everything set. We're using returns here, and because we're returning it directly, we don't have to have a break because it's automatically going to exit out. All right, so we enter the game ID. We're going to find the game. Let's see, so we got to call our game selection because that's where our method is at. Find game ID by the game ID. And this is going to introduce a new variable called game by ID, which is fine. And now, what is the next thing in our criteria? The next thing says, oh, I remember. If they enter 0, right? If they select 0, then it cancels and displays, thank you, we're sorry to see you go. All right. So we need to catch that. If they enter 0, we need to ask the question. If game ID is equivalent to 0, sout we're going to say thank you. I'm just going to copy and paste this in. Thank you, we're sorry to see you go. Come again. And in our case, we'll just use a system.out exit. Again, this isn't recommended everywhere because it can throw problems, but for this demonstration, this is what we'll do. All right. So we got the game ID. Now we're saying, please enter how long. Okay, so else, got the game ID. And we're going to tell them what they selected. System out print line, you selected. And we'll say plus, game by ID, display. Now why is that erroring out? Oh, because there's that. We're going to take right. Exactly. Can't do that because it doesn't return a string. So you may not have caught that. The error message was telling me that it returned a string. So we're going to say game ID display because we already got a way of displaying the game that they have chosen. Now, system out print line print. We have to ask the next question. Please enter how long you would like to play. My copy-paste abilities are not very well today. Okay. Please enter how long you would like to play. And we're going to say scanner, next int, and this is int hours, right? All right, we're doing pretty good. I feel like we need to pause though and test our logic for a moment because we've got a lot of code that we've written and we haven't ran this yet and tested it. And it's going to get messy if we don't test it. So let's go ahead and run the program. And see where we're at. So enter your username. I'm going to be Saipan Man. And a lot just spit by, didn't it? Well, these are all the games that have been entered in. But welcome, Saipan Man. And we display the games. So that's what our logic tells it to do, so that's correct. So we have all these games that's just spun by us, and we need to evaluate. So please select a game. All right, I'm going to select number 10 since it's right there. I select number 10. It says you selected Outer Wilds. Yeah, that is it. And how long would I like to play? 2 hours. All right, so everything worked so far, so good. All right, there's a lot that we could probably do here to make it prettier. Maybe maybe change the display to list it out a different way. All right, but so far everything's working just fine. All right, so our last question is the hours. So we need to say if hours equal 0, we're going to spit out the same statement again. Thank you, we're sorry to see you go. Now, this is most definitely an opportunity to create a method because we're evaluating the same variable twice and then using the same information. So let's do that. Public void determine exit int code, and so what we can do is copy this in. We'll change it from hours to code. If code equals 0, system exit, right? But we want to make this a Boolean because we may need to return true. Now, I want you to think about that, what we've done there. If it is 0, we're never going to return anything, right? The logic will just exit, kill the program. If it doesn't equal 0, we're going to come right back out, right? So we're going to take this code and we're going to replace it here. Determine exit, and we're going to pass in hours. But we have to do this by the name of our variable, game selection. It's our instantiated class, because remember, we're still in the public static void main method, and it might be helpful to put this here. Bottom of public static void main method. That way we can always just see it. All right. So we got determine exit. So we'll take that and we'll do the same thing here. We'll copy and paste that and we'll pass in the game ID. And if they're not going to do it anymore, if they're not going to continue and they just enter 0, then we exit. All right, so that's the code that does that. This is the code that finds our game by ID. This is the code that displays all of our games, and then we get down to our class. We got quite a bit of code here so far. Hopefully you're following along and this makes sense to you. Okay, so the next thing we're saying, please enter how long they would like to play. We've done that. And if they enter 0, we exit the program. Now, we need to take the information and we need to calculate what the total cost they need to pay and then exit the program. All right. Let's create a method called public void calculate. Let's see, calculate total cost. Set it up like that for a moment. We know that we're going to need information that's passed in here. We're going to need the game ID. And since we already spit back out the game up here, we can actually just say we're going to take the data type of game, and we need to know, might be good to have the user to present in this display. And then we need what else? What else other information do we need? We need the int of the hours they're going to play. All of that is very useful information. And then we need to construct how we're going to calculate this. All right. So based on our rules, we have, let me look at the rules here. If the user wants to play the latest release games, an additional fee is applied per hour based on how recent the game was purchased by Fantasy Digital. Okay, and we can determine that based on the information in here. So we have the months ago, right? Yeah. Let's create a bit of logic that determines the the rate. So we're going to have it return double. Determine cost by age, or let's say month age. We know what that means. And we're going to pass in the game because that's really all the information we need from that. So if game get months ago is what? Is 1 to 3 months. So we're going to say if game get months ago is less than or equal to 3. Now let's think about that. Our rule is it has to be a number between 1 and 3. So I think we want to say just less than 3. Yeah. All right, now we're going to get into the next piece of logic. So this means that we need to return our rate. And we already set a rate up at the top, if you remember. So 1 to 3 months. So we can just copy that and return that rate. If, let's see, else, if game get months ago is greater than 2, this is where it gets, this is the catchy logic here, okay? Now we need to make sure it's greater than 2 and less than 6. Now think about that. Why are we determining that? What's the point behind that logic? We got an error here. Expected, else if. Oh, we have to include the variable that we're evaluating again. That's why. You know, I've been programming now for 13 years, and sometimes you run into scenarios where you just have to pause and think. Okay, if, see, else if game's month is greater than 2, so it means if it's greater than 2, that means it's going to be 3, right? To make it more readable, we could say greater than or equal to 3, because that aligns with our logic better, right? And that doesn't contradict this. So games get months ago is greater than or equal to 3 and less than 6. That's correct. And so then we're going to return 3 to 6 months. Else return, what are we returning? The flat rate. All right. This determines the cost based by month of age. Now, in this scenario, we don't want to return the flat rate because we want this logic to only return $10, $5, or 0 for the extra rate. So we really need to determine extra cost to make the method more meaningful to us. All right. I know that I'm maybe catching some of you off guard here with that logic, but it'll make sense in a moment. All right, so we have calculate the total cost. Let's correct that spelling mistake there. Calculate the total cost. So we're going to determine the extra cost by month of the age of the game. And that's going to give us a double the extra cost. That'll tell us that. And then we need to determine, we know that the flat rate, and then times the hours. So let's take the double total cost equals, I'm going to put this in parentheses, extra cost, and we're going to put the flat rate plus the extra cost times the hours. So what we're saying is if you choose one of the games that was purchased 1 month ago, then that cost is $10 an hour plus the extra cost for the game because it was purchased recently times the hours you're going to play it. That gives us part of the calculation, but then we also need to determine what does this game have a license cost? Well, so the last part of our calculation, and this may seem kind of strange to you, but I am wrapping everything in parentheses for readability. The reason is that you know explicitly what is being calculated first, right? So we're going to take the game and we're going to get the license restriction cost and add it to it. Now, we want to display this. So I'm going to say system out print line. Thank you, Mr. Username. For your selection. System out print line, your total bill for, I'm going to take the game and get the name of the game, total bill for whatever, and I'm going to do it like that, is system out print line I don't know what I'm thinking here. Is the total cost. And because it doesn't include dollar signs in the double, we're just adding it there. All right, so let's take our method. We have game selection, and we're going to call calculate total cost. We're going to pass in the game by ID that was selected. We're going to pass in the username, and we're going to pass in the hours. And at this point, our little application should be complete. Let's run it and see what happens. Okay, I'm going to bring that up here a little bit so you can see it better. Enter username, Saipan I can't type. Saipan man. There's all the games. I'm going to use game number 9 because I want to play Resident Evil. So I'm going to enter that one. You selected game number 9, Resident Evil. Does this game have a restriction? True, it does. License restriction is $2. All right. Please enter how long you'd like to play the game. I'm going to say for 5 hours. And thank you, Mr. Saipan. Your selection, your total bill for Resident Evil 2 is $102. Wow. So there you go. We have decomposed what we saw in your Moodle Classroom for creating this game. We went ahead and created a interclass called game to store this value, and then use that as a data type, right? We use that as a data type in here. Let's go down to this class again so you can see that. We created this inner class called game, used it as a data type, and it has all this functionality in it, built into it. And then we use that data type to declare our different games. And then we constructed our logic, we created some methods, we have some complex if-else logic here. We utilize the switch method and output the game. All right, now I'm not posting the code. Your job is to take everything we've done so far, recreate the game, call it exactly what I called it, and send me the Java class. Guys, I hope you've been following along and not been falling asleep, because this is a long video. But please submit the class as part of your homework for this week. All right. Cheers, everyone.